The preterite past tense in Portuguese talks about actions that happened and were completed in the past. It often corresponds to the English simple past, so we think of it as something that happened and is viewed as completed. In general, the tense contains many components, such as regular verbs, irregular ones, spelling and stem changes, and time expressions. For this lesson, we'll cover each concept step by step, starting with regular verbs. Portuguese verbs fall into three categories, such as verbs that end in ar, ir. The good news about this tense is that regular verbs follow predictable patterns, and we'll use the verbs falar, comer, partir. Let's conjugate falar, to speak, which ends in ar. To conjugate falar, we take the infinitive, drop the ending, and add the following endings. Falei, falaste, falou, falemos, falaram. The meanings are I spoke, you spoke, and so on. And as a note, the ending emos is the same as in the present, so time markers will indicate that an action is in the past. Now, let's conjugate comer, to eat, which ends in er. To conjugate comer, we follow the same pattern by taking the infinitive, dropping the ending, and adding the following endings. Comi, comeste, comeu, comemos, comeram. The meanings are I ate, you ate, and so on. And again, the ending emos is the same as in the present, so we rely on context to show the time. Now, let's conjugate partir, to leave, which ends in ir. To conjugate partir, we follow the same pattern by taking the infinitive, dropping the ending, and adding the following endings. Parti, partiste, partiu, partimos, partiram. The meanings are I left, you left, and so on. And once again, the ending imos is the same as in the present, so we rely on context. Also, the ending in eu is borrowed from verbs. Essentially, we can see how regular verbs are conjugated in the Portuguese preterite, following different endings for different verbs. These endings are not too hard to remember, so we don't need to memorize every verb. Instead, it's better to focus on three patterns, which we can use in many sentences, like Eu falei com Maria ontem. Eles falaram comigo. Ele comeu muito. Nós comemos juntos. Eu parti cedo. Ela partiu às 8. As we can see, certain time markers tell us that the actions happened and were completed in the past. Nonetheless, it's important to see irregular verbs in this tense. Before learning their conjugation, Portuguese does have a lot of irregular verbs, which is very hard to remember. Rather than knowing all of them, let's consider what makes a verb irregular. A Portuguese verb is irregular in the preterite when it changes the stem, follows different endings, or has completely unexpected forms. While some verbs need to be memorized, others can be somewhat predictable. For instance, a verb can be irregular in one part of its conjugation, but it can still follow a predictable pattern elsewhere. Instead of memorizing all verbs, the big picture is to look for stems and endings. To simplify learning, I will categorize each type of irregularity with the most commonly used verbs. This way, following each pattern is a lot simpler. Let's start with irregular stems. These verbs develop a special stem in the preterite, so once you learn the stem, some endings can be predictable. One verb is ter, to have. Tive, tiveste. Teve, tivemos. Tiveram. A similar verb is estar, to be. Estive, estiveste. Esteve, estivemos. Estiveram. The connection between ter and estar is very similar. A different verb is fazer, to do or make. Fiz, fizeste. Fez, fizemos. Fizeram. Here, the stem fiz appears a lot, but ele, ela, você follow fez. Another verb is dizer, to say or tell. Disse, disseste. Disse, dissemos. Dizeram. Here, disse is borrowed for eu, você, ele, ela, so context tells the difference. A similar verb is trazer, to bring. Trouxe, trouxeste. Trouxe, trouxemos. Trouxeram. Trouxe is borrowed twice, so we rely on context. A different verb is poder, can or be able to. Pude, pudeste. Pode, pudemos. Puderam. Here, the stem pud appears a lot, but ele, ela, você follow pode with a circumflex accent. A similar verb is por, to put. Pus, puseste. Pos, pusemos. Puseram. The stem pus appears a lot, but ele, ela, você follow pus with a circumflex accent. A different verb is saber, to know, using the stem soube. Soube, soubeste. Soube, soubemos. Souberam. Soube is borrowed twice, so we rely on context. A similar verb is querer, to want. Quis, quiseste. Quis, quisemos. Quiseram. Quis is borrowed twice, so context tells the difference. A different verb is vir, to come. Vim, vieste. Veio, viemos. Vieram. Overall, these verbs are very common in daily Portuguese. Now, let's consider verbs with unusual endings. Here, the ending pattern itself does not behave like a regular verb, and it's common in the ser family. Previously, we've seen 3 verbs that have this pattern: fazer, dizer, trazer. Such verbs have irregular stems, and they also follow distinctive endings. A different verb is dar, to give, which also has irregular endings. Dei, deste. Deu, demos. Deram. In essence, there aren't that many irregular verbs with unusual endings, and this is a good reminder that a verb can look irregular without being fully irregular in the preterite. Now, let's consider fully irregular verbs, which have to be memorized. The most common ones in this category are 2 verbs that share the same preterite form: ser, to be, ir, to go. Fui, foste. Foi, fomos, foram. Because they have the same form, we rely on context. Ir signifies movement from one place to another, using places and destinations as markers. Ser is about description, identity, and events, so the difference is between going somewhere and what something was. Finally, let's consider a special group of verbs that change meaning in the preterite. Some verbs have a past form that is more specific than English, so the irregularity is not always about conjugation. Sometimes the preterite form can have a different interpretation, and the verbs to consider here are saber and conhecer. In my previous video, I explained their use in the present tense, and here we can see their meanings in the past. In the preterite, saber and conhecer indicate coming to know something or a complete moment of realization. A sentence like ela soube a verdade mais tarde means she found out the truth later, not she knew the truth. Similarly, conhecer, to know by being familiar with, also changes in meaning. It follows regular conjugations in the preterite, but it means meeting or encountering someone for the first time, like eu conheci Maria ontem. I met Maria yesterday. The key idea is the beginning of knowing, and this goes to show that the preterite is not just about changing time, but also how actions are interpreted. That's why they feel different from regular actions. At last, to fully finish this lesson, we can see some sentences with irregular verbs and time expressions. Eu tive muito trabalho ontem. Eu estive em casa durante a tarde. Nós fizemos bom trabalho. Ela disse a verdade. Eles trouxeram comida para a festa. Nós pudemos terminar o trabalho. Eu quis comprar aquele livro. Eu soube da notícia ontem. Eu pus o livro na mesa. Eu fui estudante naquela época. Eu fui ao supermercado ontem. Tu foste ao cinema? In conclusion, this is how the preterite past tense fully works in Portuguese. Instead of memorizing all verbs, it's better to build recognition patterns, and by using this strategy, the tense will become predictable.